Hello. There's nothing I like more than seeing a big picture of me on screen. So I put one in my own presentation. Hello, Modrover. You all look very nice. Actually, what I can see. My name is Matt Desmier. Like one of our earlier speakers, I think this is my fourth AllWeb. I think I've done 2 in Skopje, 1 in Albania, and now I'm here, and I'm very pleased to be here. I desperately need the toilet, so this will probably go quite quickly. You'll be pleased to know. And I also feel like a little bit of an imposter, I've got to admit. So everybody else who's spoken so far today is an expert. And they've been telling you some very, very, very good, interesting details about their subject areas. I'm not going to do that, right? So I was listening to the new Nick Cave audio book on the plane over here yesterday, and he said this, and I quickly scribbled it down in my bag. It was like, say out loud what you're thinking. The more you say it, it validates the idea. So that's all I'm doing right now. I'm going to spend the next 15, 20 minutes thinking out loud through an idea that I've been working on and been bubbling around in my head for the past year or so. And it's leading up to a framework that I use with clients when I help with their branding strategies and with their content strategies about what they should and shouldn't be portraying themselves on online and offline, or online or offline, or just portraying themselves to a general public. So bear with me. We're going to go on a journey. I hope you get something from it. I really do. Now, it all started with the 4 Ps, right? And we heard this earlier. It was about marketing is product, price, place, and promotion. And that worked brilliantly for years, right? The right product at the right price in the right place with the right promotion, you're going to sell a shit ton of it. That was the plan. And that was when marketing first started. And, there wasn't a whole lot of competition. Yes, there was competition, but distribution and manufacturing and all these things, that mattered. And that made it difficult to compete. So, the right product at the right price in the right place with the right promotion, you're nailing it. You're absolutely nailing it. Then in 1980, Al Rees and Jack Trout released this book. Has anybody read this book? Hands up if you've read this book. Shame on you. This is probably the greatest marketing book ever written. If not the greatest, then it's easily the most useful marketing book. And I urge all of you, it's like this thick, it's tiny, but it is just brilliant. And it's the base point for my talk that I'm giving you today. I'm going to be talking about positioning, right? But none of what I say is in this book whatsoever. So this is not a shortcut. So what these guys said when they were talking about this, came out in 1980, remember? So in 1980, this is pre-internet, they were there saying the marketplace is going to become a lot more competitive. It's going to be congested. It's going to become busy. And it's going to be a lot harder for your right product at the right place with the right price, with the right promotion to cut through and get in front of the right people. What you need to start doing is start thinking about your brand and how it occupies a place in the mind of your consumer. Not your customer, the consumer, the audience. And this is the point here is like, this is about raising it beyond just product marketing, right? Raising it beyond just the features. Now we're talking about the benefits. This is about the brand. This is about how do I lodge this in the minds of my consumer. That's what this book was all about, right? So let's think about the anatomy of a brand. It's the identity, right? It's the stuff that you are. It's who you are and what you do and how you do it. It's the message you're putting out in the world. It's the image. It's how that message is then received by other people, be that your reputation or how they talk about you or any of those things. And it's about the innovation. It's the product itself. It's the thing that you do. It's those 3 things, right? That becomes the basis of your brand. And then orbiting around that nucleus are these things like your customers or your partners or your employees or your competitors. And it's how they react to your image, your identity, and your innovation. Right. So once I'd drawn this started looking a bit like an atom. So that got me thinking about physics. And then I started thinking about Isaac Newton. Sorry, like I said, you're going on a journey, right? This is the journey that's been buzzed around my head. So, Isaac Newton in the 17th century wrote the first law of motion, that every object will remain at rest or in uniform motion in a straight line until it is compelled to change by a state of action by an external force. Basically, you're going to move in this direction unless something changes you. And that's kind of how we thought about positioning. We had our position, we came up with our brand, and we thought, right, there you go, we've done our positioning. We're a startup, we've done our positioning. Oh, now we're growing, so we better relook at our positioning again. And then we got to being established, so we ought to look at our positioning one more time. And it was always reactionary. It was like we're on this linear journey, and we're going to look at our positioning at the various points. We'll decide when we'll look at that positioning. We're going to be that external force. There's nothing wrong with that. That's worked perfectly. It still works perfectly for a lot of people. But then something happened around the sort of mid-90s, the 2000s. It's called the internet, basically. The internet happened, and everything got faster, and everything got busier, and everything got more confusing and more competitive, and more congested, just like our recent Jack Trout said. And it's not that the basic building blocks of branding had changed, but it was the importance and the things around them that had changed. So it was almost like the theory, like Isaac Newton's theory, had changed. And so that got me, it was busy. You had more competitors in the same space doing more things. Now, they've all got their own position. They're all sitting there, and they're all interacting in some way or other. Now, this got me thinking about Einstein and the theory of relativity. So I'm still in that sort of physicsy space, that science space. And the theory of relativity, I hope there's no physicists in the room, because I may well get this wrong. This is just what I read on the plane on the way over here, right? But this is the theory of simultaneity of relativity, that two things that happen at the same time, or might appear to happen at the same time, might in fact be happening at completely different times. It depends upon your perspective. Bear with me, this does relate back to branding eventually. So this idea that your perspective changes or your position changes depending on the perspective of the person viewing it. If you imagine the idea that they talk about to explain Einstein's theory of relativity is a bolt of lightning. And if you're stood in between two bolts of lightning, they appear to happen at the same time. But if you're traveling at the speed of light up in the stratosphere, one's definitely happening before the other. Now, depending on your perspective, they might be happening at the same time, or they might be happening minutes apart. You don't know. It's your perspective that matters. And what this sort of made me think about from a brand's perspective is actually the environment. The time and space is bending around different brands. And whilst, yes, my customers, my partners, my employees, and my competitors still matter a little bit, it's the environment within which they sit that really matters. And that is bending depending upon the influence that those brands have. For instance, right, Patagonia, Yvon Chouinard, right, well, let's go back. Patagonia is already having quite an impact on its sector, okay? The way it approaches the world of business. You can trace back the rise of the B Corp movement to Patagonia. But then last week, even Chouinard announces that he's going to give away all of his money. He's given the company away. He hasn't given away his money. He's kept a big fat stack of cash for himself. But from here on in, the company is going to give all of its profits away. It's not in the business of making money purely for shareholders. Now, the impact that is having on brands in any different sector, in any different industry, is a very tangible thing. You can see the way it's bending the world around it. And this matters now in case of your positioning, because your position, regardless of whether you're selling T-shirts like Patagonia, or you're selling skis, or you're selling services, you're selling SEO or marketing, actually, we're seeing a rise in B Corps in advertising agencies. So the stuff that is happening there is having an influence on your business. The perspective has changed. Same with things like Apple. They did not invent the mobile phone. They did not invent the MP3 player. They did not invent any of the stuff that they are heralded as being innovative with. But the impact that their design has, and the way in which their processes work, has an impact on our businesses, regardless of what the sector is we're in. Same with Nike, when Colin Kaepernick was taking the knee at all of those events and Nike got behind him and then they produced that wonderful ad campaign, you could see the influence it had on so many other people. So their position was changing, not because they chose to change it, but because of the perspective of other people around them. So now we've got this different way of looking at it. It's no longer a linear process that we're taking through for branding and positioning. Now it's this circular thing that's dipping, and it matters on how big you are or where your competitors are or where your audience is. And actually the perspective of your partners or your suppliers all matters on your perspective. Sorry, I always get a bit out of breath when I start thinking about physics, not because I'm excited about it, because I'm not, I know nothing about it. It's because I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone. So I like to then just take a breath and relax, find something to relax about. So in 1950, Akira Kurosawa released the Japanese film Rashomon. It tells a tale of intrigue and death, rape and murder. Basically, a young woman and her husband are traveling through a forest. They get attacked by a bandit. She gets raped. He dies. And someone watches it all. And that's the interesting thing about this story, is what Kurosawa does is he tells you this story from 4 different perspectives. So you hear through a medium, you hear the dead samurai tell his version of events. You hear the wife tell her version of events. You hear the bandit tell his version of events. And you hear an onlooker, the woodcutter, tell his version of events. Each and every one of these people is telling their truth, their true version is from their perspective, from what they saw, from what they experienced. This was the truth. And what Kurosawa doesn't do in this film is tell you what the truth is. He leaves it to you as the 5th perspective, as the viewer, as the voyeur, to decide for yourself who you think is in the right, who you think is in the wrong, how you think this story played out, because you weren't there. And it was all about different perspectives. And the wonderful thing about this film is that you don't know. Your perspective matters, their perspective matters. They are all as valid a perspective as any other. And it's because their position is relative to the activity that's happening, and they're all different. It's kind of like I'm sure you've seen this picture before, and this illustrates how your perspective can have a different input at the end. The fact is that there is no truth. There are only subjective perspectives or perceptions of an event at any one time. So bringing this back to branding, because that's clearly what I'm here to talk about, not physics, not relativity or Japanese cinema. If you think back that anatomy of a brand, right? That it was about the image and it was about the identity and the innovation, and how from our perspective as the business owner, we chose our position. We decided what that position was. But then the world got much, much busier, and there was lots of different things happening. And actually, our customer might shop with us, but they'll shop with other people, and they'll be influenced by other people. And our suppliers are supplying other people, and how they work influences our brand and how we react to it. So then it become a lot more confusing, and actually time and space and all of these things influenced how our brand would be perceived in the external world. So it's no longer useful for us to view it in that way. We've got to think of a new framework to think about. So now it's about we ought to put ourselves in the position of our competitors. We always do a competitor analysis. Whenever you write a marketing strategy, there's always a page that goes competitor analysis. They do this, they do this. But actually we need to go deeper into that. We need to think about that competitor analysis a little bit more. We need to think about what are their motivations. Who is our competitor? Are they selling the same stuff as us, or are we competing for the same audience's time? Is it about disposable money that they're either going to spend on us or they'll spend on someone else? If you're selling TikTok, is your competitor someone who's selling SEO? Because actually the person buying the service has got a finite budget. So we need to spend a bit more time thinking about that competitor. Think about our partners and the supply chain. Think about our employees and what they want out of this, because actually your employees through TikTok and social media, have become your biggest evangelists. They're the guys that are selling more than anybody else. So it's not that this model is out of date. This is still incredibly important. This is still the building block of what your brand should be. But if we're thinking about it through the perspective of relativity or Japanese cinema, then actually it's much smaller than we thought, and it sits a lot closer to the center of something else. And actually the framework now that we should be thinking about is not what our identity is. That is what it is. We need to understand it. We need to understand what our image is. We need to understand what our product is and what we're doing that's new or not new, where the innovation comes from. But we need to think a bit more, in a bit more depth, about our competitors and how they're interacting with our brand and how we interact with their world, how we interact with our potential suppliers, with our distribution channels, with our employees, and with our current and potential clients. Because that is what the future of branding and the future of positioning is looking like. It's not that book by Al Rees and Jack Trout, which I know you're all going to go out and read soon, because you should. It's that actually the world's moved on, and the things that they were saying would come true, have come true, and now we need a new framework. And I reckon this is it. So your position, these are your 3 takeaways. If you can read it, I made this slide really, really difficult, so you really, really had to concentrate. But this is about your position is contextual, and it is relative to your environment. Actually, different perspectives produce different positions all the time, and it is a constantly evolving, constantly moving space. It's never going to be static. So we're never on that linear path again. Now you've got to be constantly thinking about your positioning, because it will impact on the fast-moving marketing. If you are doing promotion, not marketing, fast-moving promotion that you're doing. If you are putting messages out in the world, you've got to think, is this position for my competitors? Is this position to fight against or to attract new employees? What am I doing with this? Where is my position for this one piece of promotion? Thanks.